The last time my mother used the word celebrate, someone left in tears, and the rest of us pretended not to notice. My name is Aria Quinn. I'm 33, a repair tech who coaxes cracked screens back to life and makes slow laptops behave. I used to believe that if I stayed quiet long enough, a family could hold together on the strength of my silence. 2 weeks ago, my mother called with honey in her voice. "Come early," she said. "We'll celebrate." She didn't say what. She never does. The line clicked off and left the apartment sounding bigger than it is, like the walls were waiting to hear if I'd make the same mistake again. In the kitchen, Caleb was rinsing coffee mugs, sleeves pushed to his elbows, the steady kind of man who turns worry into weather, something you register, then move through. "Just dinner," I told him. "If it turns weird, we leave." He smiled without showing teeth. "Then we'll be home by 8. Ella heard the word celebrate from the living room and came twirling in with a sticker stuck to her cheek, 5 years old and full of paper stars and unused kindness. "Is there cake?" she asked. "At Grandma's, there's always cake," I said, then bit the inside of my cheek. "There's always cake when it's for the right person." I set the phone down and reached for the bakery box we'd pre-ordered from the good place across town, the one with croissants that flake like first snow. My mother once called grocery store pastries cardboard with icing, and I still can't unhear the smile she wrapped around those words. Caleb dried his hands and handed me the receipt like it was a tiny shield. "We bring what we like," he said, "not what earns points." Saturday arrived damp and gray, a towel wrung out over the city. Ella insisted on her yellow dress with the bow that had something to prove. Caleb buckled her in and passed me the box like we were carrying a secret we meant to keep. The drive was short, the kind that doesn't give you enough time to change your mind. At the last light before my parents' street, I watched the turn signal blink, on, off, on, like a metronome for decisions I'd postponed for years. My stomach tightened the way it does before a phone vibrates with a name you can't ignore. "We can still turn around," Caleb said. "I know," I said, and didn't. We parked on the street because the driveway is for family cars, which has never included mine. The lawn was clipped. The porch was dressed with red geraniums. The house looked ready for a story with a happy ending. I shifted the bakery box to my left arm, took Ella's hand with my right, and felt her small fingers close like trust. If you're hearing this, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And stay with me, because the moment we cross that threshold, the rules stop being a feeling and start being written in ink. The door opened before we could knock. My mother's hug stopped an inch from contact, the way you pause over a hot stove to feel heat without getting burned. "You made it," she said to me, eyes sliding past my shoulder like someone taller, louder, more useful was supposed to be standing there. "Shoes off, please. Floor's just waxed." Caleb balanced the bakery box while I bent to unbuckle Ella's sandals. The entryway smelled like lemon cleaner and roast. On the console table sat a neat grid of name tags in cheerful block letters: Marjorie, Frank, Sabrina, Kyle, Aunt Margot, Uncle Vince. Even Coach Dale had one, somehow part of the bloodstream. A folded card leaned against each stack of plates on the sideboard. Prime, Standard, Limited. Like dinner was an airline and we'd bought the wrong ticket. "Look at you, sunshine," my mother said to Ella in a voice spun with sugar. Caleb lifted the pastry box a little. "We'll see if there's room," she cut in, already turning to straighten a fork into the fan she liked to call presentation. "We've got a system tonight." My eyes found the smallest plate, the one set apart on a paper doily the size of a suggestion. A white rectangle waited there, crisp and confident. "Ella, limited guest." The letters were so straight they could have been drawn with a ruler. "What is this?" The question came out softer than my throat felt. "It's not personal," my mother said, still arranging. "Little ones nibble, helps with portions." She smiled the way you smile at a barista who spells your name wrong but you're late for a meeting. Frank clapped my shoulder like we were teammates. Don't sulk, he said. There's plenty to go around if you behave. Behave landed between us like a doorstop. Caleb stepped closer and slipped the tag between two fingers. He didn't peel it. He just looked at it like a thorn you study before you decide where to place your hand. Sabrina drifted in from the living room mid-laugh, something performative in the way her eyebrows rose. Her eyes snagged on the tag in Caleb's hand, then on Ella, then on me. She leaned as if sharing a joke we'd both enjoy. That means no shrimp, she whispered, breath mint-sweet. Kyle chuckled behind her, and somewhere in the next room a couple of voices echoed it, like a line had been fed and received. Ella sounded out the letters her kindergarten teacher had given her just weeks ago. Let meet Ted. She looked up at me to borrow my face for the meaning. I squeezed her hand twice. Our code for your safe. The room got louder by not changing volume at all. Come on in, my mother sang. We've got the kids' table set. She shepherded us through the hallway like a tour guide with a schedule. The living room was bright and impossibly friendly. Aunt Margot patted a spot on the couch like upholstery could invite belonging. Uncle Vince was already 2 stories deep. Coach Dale said something about hustle to no one in particular. The kids' table waited in the corner. Tiny chairs, a paper tablecloth, crayons lined up like soldiers at inspection. My mother set the limited guest tag in front of Ella's plate with the precision of a nurse labeling vials. Next to it, 2 apple slices blinked up from a saucer as if they were enough to explain the word. Dinner soon, she chirped. Shoes belong under chairs, napkins on laps. She glanced at the sideboard and back at me, a quick teacher's eyebrow that meant color inside the lines. Caleb placed the bakery box on a side table, careful, like you lower a fragile thing you might need as proof later. I could hear the sound of glassware, the clink of a spoon against a stem, a run-up to some announcement waiting in the next room. The white cards on the coffee table, Prime, Standard, Limited, caught the light like little billboards for a town I never wanted to live in. Ella traced a crayon along the edge of her plate, quiet, concentrating, the way kids do when they decide not to need anything they're not sure they're allowed to want. Let's find your seat, I said, keeping my voice even. I picked up the tag, turned it over, and set it face down. The word disappeared, but the mark it left stayed where I could feel it. From the dining room, laughter rose and settled. Sabrina's heels clicked across the hardwood with the confidence of someone who expects applause. My mother smoothed the tablecloth with the flat of her hand, a gesture that always meant order had arrived and feelings could find another room. Caleb stood behind me, a quiet wall. Ella leaned her shoulder into my leg, warm and certain. The house looked like a celebration and felt like a checklist. I could already tell the night had rules. I just hadn't been told all of them yet. Sabrina clinked a spoon against a glass, and the house inhaled. Conversations paused mid-laugh, the way birds go silent before weather changes. She stood in the dining room beside a whiteboard crowded with arrows and cheerful handwriting, boxes labeled Vision, Legacy, Launch, every arrow pointing toward the word at the center, Family Equity Hub. Okay, family, she sang, palms open like a host walking on stage. Thank you for coming early. Tonight is special. Kyle positioned himself behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the endorsement pose. My mother hovered at the end of the table, smoothing a ripple that only she could see. Frank cleared his throat like he'd practiced. Sabrina tapped the board with the back of the marker. We're ready to turn a dream into a structure. Dad's name opens doors at the bank. Mom runs front of house with that A-plus hospitality. Kyle is the marketing arm. She glanced at him. He lifted a bottle of sparkling water like a trophy. And Arya handles the finances. Organization is her love language. Laughter rippled, practiced and polite. I felt Caleb behind me, steady as a closed door. Ella sat at the kids' table with her crayons lined in a row, the flipped card a small blank island by her plate. 2 apple slices waited like they'd already been told when to disappear. Sabrina switched markers and drew a pyramid of squares, tiers labeled prime, standard, limited, then a fat arrow into a box that said founders. People respond to clarity, she said. We're offering tiers of involvement so everyone has a place. She flipped to a fresh section of the board and wrote, Bridge 30K. This is the friendly paper, founders' terms. We're locking today. Frank stepped into the doorway, hands clasped like a ref about to start a game. This is about family owning something together. Legacy. The word landed like a stamp. My mother turned her head just enough to aim a smile at Caleb. Let's not ruin the mood, she said lightly. This is a celebration. Caleb didn't answer. He just shifted to give me a clean line of sight to the board. Sabrina kept going, quick as a commercial. The first round was a learning phase, soft launch, different market conditions. But we have momentum now. Gym partnership, influencer alignment, free media through Coach Dale's network. Coach Dale lifted a thumb without looking up from his phone. We're at the brink, she said, brightening. All we need is everyone pulling in the same direction. 30 today locks the deal. Dad's already lined up the lending. We're family. We move faster than strangers. I scanned the table, prime cards stacked like invitations to a wedding I hadn't RSVP'd to. Standard arranged in neat fans. Limited fanned out last, clean and bland as a waiting room. At the kids' table, Ella colored inside the outline of a star with intense care, as if rightness could be made by staying in the lines. Sabrina turned to me fully, still smiling, already confident of my role. Arya, you'll love the spreadsheets. We built them with your brain in mind. Kyle laughed, small and obedient. And to make this simple, she said, tapping the bridge, 30K again. We can split it, 20 today, 10 next month. Founders discounts, family equity. We win together. My mother slid a hand to my elbow, the thermostat touch. Let's not overcomplicate, she murmured. Trust is the term. I looked at the whiteboard, at the pyramid, at the word founders written in pink like a promise that tasted like candy. I looked at Ella's 2 apple slices and the blank square of cardstock turned face down. A fan of silverware winked beneath the chandelier like well-behaved stars. Sabrina uncapped the marker again, as if the final stroke depended on me. So, she said, bright and seamless, Arya locks 30 today. We'll circulate the agreements after dessert. The room tilted toward me, a collective lean disguised as attention. Caleb's hand settled at the small of my back, a quiet signal that read, I'm here if you need to move. Somewhere in the kitchen, a tray clattered, and my mother called out, Ladies first! Then came the practiced laughter that always made me feel like I'd missed a cue I never agreed to learn. I set my palm on the table to feel something solid. The markers squeaked, the arrows waited, the tears glowed. In the doorway, a line formed, plates ready, as if the answer had already been plated and was coming toward us in courses. Frank stepped forward like a master of ceremonies and spread his hands. Prime first, he called. Standard next. Limited at the end so they don't fill up on the good stuff. Laughter rolled across the room, the kind that pretends to be harmless because it arrives with a smile. Chairs scraped, plates lifted. The line formed as if it had rehearsed. Platters moved in a bright procession, shrimp gleaming, roast sliced thick, potatoes glossed with butter. Sabrina floated along the sideboard, tapping spoons, adding adjectives to dishes that didn't need any. My mother stood near the head of the table, directing flow like a traffic cop with perfect bangs. At the kids' table, Ella watched the parade with the careful awe of a child trying to measure what counts as wanting. She traced a small circle with her finger where her tag had been before I turned it over. Caleb angled himself behind me, close enough for me to feel steady without having to look. A bowl of shrimp drifted toward our corner, passing from prime hands to standard ones. When it reached the orbit of the kids' table, my mother swooped in with a polished smile and lifted it back to the adults' line. "Careful," she said, bright as glass. "Let's keep the little ones from spoiling dinner." Kyle chuckled like he'd heard a clever line. Sabrina's mouth tilted. "House rules," she said, and the phrase slid into my ear like a paper cut. Ella leaned into my side. "Do I have to wear my word?" she whispered, eyes on the upside-down card. I knelt so we were level. "You don't have to wear anything that hurts," I said. Caleb set his hand on the back of my chair, a quiet anchor. Frank's voice rose again from the buffet. "Grab plenty, folks. We've got a big night." He loaded his plate like a billboard for appetite. Sabrina clinked a glass just to make the room look at her, then laughed as if the sound itself were confetti. Aunt Margot waved us toward the end of the line, the friendly sort of wave that still places you last. We moved with the current because standing still would have been its own announcement. By the time we reached the platters, corners had cooled and the best slices had been made into someone else's memory. Caleb handed me a plate, then one to Ella. 2 apple slices waited where my mother had left them, winking up from the saucer, a tiny sermon on sufficiency. "Napkins on laps," my mother sang, passing behind us with a bottle of dressing. She glanced at the kids' table, then at me, a flash of raised brows that said, "Keep it neat, keep it quiet, keep it moving." We took our seats. The tags on the coffee table shone under the chandelier. Prime stacked high, standard fanned just so, limited tidy as a boundary. Sabrina launched back into her rhythm, pointing to the whiteboard as if dessert depended on nodding. "This is the part where momentum kicks in," she said. "We're all aligned." A ladle paused over Ella's plate. A hand, not Caleb's, hovered, then retreated. "Oops," someone said, light and amused. "Limited." The word landed without weight and still managed to bruise. Ella tucked her crayon back into the row she'd made. She didn't ask for anything. That hurt worse than if she had. Caleb leaned toward me. "We can go," he murmured. "Not yet," I said, though I wasn't sure which part of me I was answering. From the doorway, my mother called, "Ladies first," and laughter followed, the same choreography as always. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and roast and something else, fresh ink. I could feel the rules drying around us, crisp and permanent. I turned the little card farther under Ella's plate until the edge disappeared, then set my palm flat against the table to remember what solid felt like. The fork looked heavier than it should, like my hand had to lift more than metal. The board squeaked behind Sabrina, arrows pointing at a future I was supposed to buy. I stared at Ella's 2 apple slices and felt an old math rise like steam. At 22, I co-signed Sabrina's first car because her credit was still a baby. 6 months, she promised. I'll refinance by summer. By fall, the bank called my number. 2 payments missed. My mother's voice went soft the way people talk to skittish dogs. "The bank doesn't care about excuses, honey." I paid before it hit Sabrina's record. When I asked her for the money, she laughed into the phone. "Relax, Arya. Money circulates. That's what it's for." Rain only fell one way. At 24, I moved into a studio you could cross in 14 steps. I sent photos of my first couch, a thrift store find that smelled like citrus cleaner and hope. "We've seen plenty of small places," my father said. "You'll upgrade when you grow up." That same week, my mother texted a picture of Sabrina's condo view. "She's thriving." 3 weeks later, a late HOA fee landed in my inbox with my name on it. "Family name looks bad with fines," my mother wrote. I paid it. She sent a heart. I kept the receipt. At 26, Caleb and I got married at City Hall on a Wednesday because the clerk said mornings were less crowded, and we liked the sound of that. We mailed invitations because we were raised to do things properly. The day of, my mother texted one word, rain. My father sent a note that read, "Saturday would have been better." Sabrina posted a beach selfie with the caption, "Recharge." That night she asked to borrow $200 until Friday. I sent it. It was cheaper than explaining disappointment. By 28, I started a spreadsheet, not to budget but to remember. Dates, amounts, reasons, promises. $175 for utilities shortfall, $387 for rent gap, $640 for a prototype that changed names 3 times, fitness app, meal prep, wellness hub, $1,700 for registration, emergency at DMV. I color-coded the lies so I could see them arriving. 8,000 turned to 12, 12 sank to 17. I watched numbers climb like ivy, green and patient. "Don't nickel and dime your sister," my mother would say, like I was the tight fist choking a plant. "Real adults don't keep score," my father added, and I believed him long enough to become a ledger. Sabrina said, "It'll all make sense when we launch." Launch became a word that meant later. Later became never in a new outfit. When Ella was born, my mother touched my shoulder in the hospital. "Now you understand sacrifice," she said, already turning to tell Sabrina she'd make a wonderful aunt. Sabrina grinned like light. I always am. There were nights at 2:11 a.m. when the ceiling felt too low and the phone lit up my face. "Can you float me 400? Stuck at the pump," Sabrina wrote. I put the phone face down and turned it over again. "Emergencies all day," my mother texted the next morning, as if chaos were proof of life. Caleb watched me do the math with my mouth closed. "You could stop," he said gently. "You don't stop being family," I lied, and opened my banking app. "I paid for a laptop the investor will reimburse." I covered a bridge payment that had nothing to cross. I forwarded money to keep the family name clean, as if my balance were a bleach pen. The spreadsheet became a second pulse. 12,000 slid to 17, to 29, to 60. The cells filled until the sum at the bottom looked like a dare, 123,080. Sabrina texted confetti when I sent transfers. My mother sent prayer hands and rules. My father forwarded an article about grit. I learned to swallow around a bruise I couldn't point to. In the dining room, Sabrina drew another arrow into the word founders, like a promise only I could seal. Ella lined her crayons into perfect order, hungry in a way that wasn't about food. I thought of my spreadsheet, of every line that proved I'd been buying quiet. I remembered the first time I told myself it was just easier to pay. The fork in my hand didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt exact. The red marker squeaked behind Sabrina. Bridge. 30K waited like an old habit, dressed as a new start. I set the fork down and let my hand rest flat on the table, steady as a page that had finally reached the bottom line. Sabrina lifted her glass, the room tilting toward her like it always did. "So Arya locks 30 today," she said, tapping the number she'd written in red. "Founder's terms, friendly paper, we'll circulate agreements after dessert." The spoon at my place stopped pretending it was part of a meal. I felt Caleb's palm touch the small of my back, not pushing, not pulling, just a steadying weight. Ella's hand found the side seam of my dress and held on. I set both palms flat on the table. My heartbeat slowed until I could count it. 3 beats, and then my voice arrived, small and exact. "No." It was soft, but it cut through everything. Sabrina blinked as if a light had changed without warning. "Sorry?" "No," I said, clearer. "No bridge, no loans, no family equity, anything." A slice of quiet slid into the room, and everyone tried not to look at it. Frank straightened, jaw tight. "Don't embarrass yourself over money," he said, like I was a child about to spill. My mother angled her body so only I could see the edge of her smile. "Don't take that tone with your father," she hissed, the words wrapped in manners. Sabrina laughed lightly, the sound you make to float past a snag. Come on, Arya. We always make things right. You know that. We're family. She tipped her head toward the board. We just need alignment. I heard you, I said. And? She spread her hands as if I were a guest on her show, and the next line was scripted. I said no. The practiced warmth cooled by a degree. Kyle exhaled through his nose, a small performance of patience. Aunt Margot reached for a napkin she didn't need. Coach Dale kept his thumb on his phone but stopped scrolling. Sabrina's smile thinned. If you can't support your own family, maybe this isn't your place. I agree, I said. Frank's chair legs hit the floor. Watch yourself. My mother touched my elbow, the thermostat touch, but I didn't change temperature. I reached for the little square of cardstock I'd slid under Ella's plate and pulled it back into the light. Limited, white and tidy, like it had never meant anything at all. I turned it over, uncapped a pen from my purse, and wrote a single word in clean block letters. No. I set the card between the salt and pepper. Sabrina stared at it as if she could argue with the ink. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, a door reconsidered. Frank said my name like it was a warning. Arya. Ella's voice came from knee height. Are we leaving? Yes, I said. I stood. The room didn't seem to know what to do with a person not following gravity. Caleb rose with me, already reaching for the bakery box, already the wall at my back. Ella slid off her chair, small shoes whispering against the polished floor. Sabrina recovered fast, like she always did. You're being dramatic, she said, bright again. We can discuss terms later. Sit, eat. Don't make a scene. This is the scene, I said, not loud, not unkind. You wrote it. Frank stepped toward the doorway, filling it with his shoulders. Caleb's look warned him off without a word. My mother took one step, then another, rehearsing a hug she wasn't going to give. Those portions were planned, she said, as if logistics could walk me back to my seat. Then your plan failed, I said. I picked up my bag. Caleb tucked the box under his arm. Ella's hand slipped into mine and stayed there. We turned toward the hall. Behind us, the chandelier hummed, the whiteboard shone, the tears waited for names. The house smelled like lemon and roast and something new, the clean edge of paper after it's been written on. No one followed us to the door. The knob was cool against my palm. The porch air felt different, like weather after a storm that forgot to make noise. We stepped over the threshold we'd crossed 1,000 times, and this time I didn't look back. By the time we reached the car, my phone was already buzzing. We drove in quiet, the bakery box on Caleb's lap like a small shield we didn't use. At the first red light, the screen filled with stacked previews, Family Equity Hub, Mom, Dad, Sabrina. I set the phone face down on my knee and let the light change. At home, we carried Ella upstairs, shoes still on, the way you carry a sleeping promise. I tucked her into bed and stood in the hallway until my breathing matched hers. When I came back to the kitchen, Caleb had the phone on the counter, unlocked, waiting. The messages spilled in like a broken pipe. Sabrina, you humiliated me on my big night. Mom, you embarrassed your sister. You made your father uncomfortable. Dad, this drama is beneath you. Apologize. Kyle, we had a plan. Aunt Margot, praying. Coach Dale, stay positive, family. Then Sabrina again. Wire 10K by noon or you're off the cap table and out of my life. Caleb leaned against the counter and read them aloud like bad poetry. You ruined the vibe, he said, eyebrows up. That one's a keeper. He tapped Do Not Disturb. We don't have to live in their weather. Morning brought a new kind of knock. The mail slot clacked, an envelope thumped. Bank of Midland, my name bold at the top. I didn't need to open it to know. The co-signed car from years ago was late again. I opened it anyway, 90 days delinquent. I sat down, called the number, and spoke the language I use at work when a machine lies and I need the truth. "I want my name off this," I said. "What do I have to do?" The answer wasn't kind, but it was clear. I did the math, transferred what the bank needed to release me, and requested the paperwork. When the confirmation email arrived, I forwarded it to Sabrina with 2 words: "You're welcome." The red receipt popped up. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, came back as an eye roll emoji. Caleb laughed under his breath, a sound without joy. "Predictable," he said. By late afternoon, the spare key turned in our lock. The door opened halfway before Caleb's hand met it. He didn't raise his voice. "Now's not good, Marjorie." She leaned around the frame, cheeks bright with indignation. "You've poisoned her," she said, eyes on me. "You used to help. You used to understand family." "I do," I said. "I just won't be your accountant." "She froze the transfers," she told Caleb, as if I weren't there. "You're making your sister struggle," she snapped at me. "She's building something." "So am I," I said. "A boundary." She blinked like the word was foreign. "If you won't apologize, don't come Sunday." I wasn't planning to. For a second, she looked surprised, then angry, then small. Caleb eased the door shut. The latch's click sounded final. That night, I pulled the old shoebox from the closet, the one with hospital bracelets, baby teeth in an envelope, Ella's stickers, folded notes. Beneath them lay the printed spreadsheet, pages and pages of dates and amounts and reasons. Caleb sat on the floor beside me. "Proof?" he asked. "Of what I traded for quiet," I said. I tore the first page in half, then the next. The sound was thin and sharp, like air leaving something that shouldn't have been closed up that long. Ella patted in, sleep-soft, rubbing her eyes. "What are you doing, Mommy?" "Cleaning up," I said. "Want to help?" She nodded solemnly and picked up a piece. "We don't need these, right?" "No, baby, not anymore." We fed the trash with paper until the box was just memories worth keeping. Ella peeled a small blue heart from her sticker sheet and pressed it to my sleeve. "So you don't forget you're loved," she said. I touched the sticker and felt the house settle. The group chat, the whiteboard, the tears, all of it sounded farther away, like a party on a street I didn't live on anymore. Caleb leaned his shoulder to mine. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. "Tomorrow," I said, and let the quiet be ours. The next night, rain started early, thin lines on the windshield that made the city look like it was breathing. Caleb drove us to the all-night diner on Maple, the one with red booths and a jukebox that never works. Ella slid into the seat and kicked her heels against the vinyl like a metronome. The air smelled like coffee and syrup and relief. Caleb ordered waffles with strawberries for her, eggs and toast for us. We didn't say much while we waited. My phone sat face down beside the napkin holder, quiet for once. When the plates came, Ella leaned over her syrup and looked up at me, eyes serious in a way 5 shouldn't be. "Are we still a family?" "Yes," I said. "A smaller one, the good kind." She nodded like I'd answered a test and forked a strawberry into her mouth. We walked out to wet sidewalks and the hum of streetlights. Back home, Ella fell asleep holding her stuffed bunny. Caleb handed me a notebook across the kitchen table like a ceremony. "Write what we fund now," he said. "Not what we're done with, what we want." I opened to a blank page. The quiet felt different, hours. I wrote slowly, careful not to turn it into rules. Predictable mornings, savings with our names on them, holidays without fights, a home that stays kind when it's quiet. I added one more line, peace that doesn't ask permission. By morning, the phone had remembered me, messages stacked like a storm front. "Sabrina, wire 10K by noon or you're off the cap table and out of my life." Mom, you've broken your father's heart. Dad, grow up. Kyle, You made this hard. Aunt Margot. Praying. Coach Dale. Stay positive, team. Caleb skimmed them, then reached over and hit Do Not Disturb. We don't need a play-by-play, he said. I scrolled to Family Equity Hub and pressed Leave Group. It felt like pulling out a splinter you've learned to live around. The mail came with another whisper of paper. This time it was my confirmation from the bank, clean letters stating what I already knew. My name was off the loan. I filed the release behind our lease, next to passports and birth certificates, in the drawer where things that matter live. Afternoon brought quiet, no pounding at the door, no lectures through the phone, just Ella's drawings taped to the fridge, stars colored all the way in, a house with 3 stick figures under a yellow scribble sun. Caleb set the bakery box on the counter and opened it. The croissants were still perfect inside, untouched. He broke one in half and slid a piece to me. Proof, he said. I tasted butter and flour and something I didn't have a word for yet. Maybe it was space, maybe it was air. That night I read the list out loud. Caleb added a line in his handwriting. Teach Ella that love never labels her less. I capped the pen. The apartment felt exactly its size and just right. Some debts don't get repaid, they get released. I stopped financing a version of love that asked my daughter to wear the word limited. I funded our peace instead. If this story resonates, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. New chapters and fresh stories are coming.